There we go. We're recording. Hello, everybody. So tonight we're going to be going over math. We're going to be spending probably about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes on math questions. Okay. So, and anyone who is joining me live, just so you know, you could type in the chat any kind of question that you might have, and I'd be more than happy to answer it. Also, you guys get a live version. You get a link to that will be emailed to you that is going to be ad-free, so you won't get any of the annoying mid-rolls. And if anyone who's watching this on recording, you're like, oh, I'd love to participate in that, links are down below as far as my site where you could go and see the updated list of events. Okay. Now, what I want to tell you is this, guys. First and foremost, math. There's a couple of formulas that you're going to know. So, Yvette said, how do I get principal, interest, tax, and insurance? I'm going to definitely go over that. That's going to be an amortization table question. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Let me talk to you about the types of questions you will typically see on the test. You know, typical math questions, okay? And they're going to come in these kinds of, the typical ones, the ones that I typically have heard are on the test. Commission question, okay? You're going to get a commission question of some sort. Most tests ask an amortization table question, okay, where you'll have to utilize the amortization table. They also like to know the area of something, okay? So the area, square footage of something. They might even ask for cubic feet. I've seen that before, cubic feet of something. That's kind of like volume. Also, some things that they might ask for too is proration, okay? Like things that are charged in arrears or in advance, okay? So you might get that, a proration question, okay? What else could you possibly get? You might get a seller net problem, okay? You might also get a profit problem, okay? So those are going to be typically, oh yeah, property tax problem. Yeah, 100% you're going to get that. Thank you for keeping me honest. That is definitely one that you're going to see. Property tax with millage. And you'll probably see some sort of questions that are going to be around, what else? Discount points. Yes. I bet you're on top of it. Discount points. Okay. Figuring out how much a house is worth. What do you mean by that, Tom? What do you mean by how much a house is worth? Oh, cap rate problems. That's what that was one that I was going to go through too. Cap rate problems. So these are all typical problems you'll see on the math portion of the exam. Okay. So with that being said, okay. With that being said, okay, what I want to do is I want to go over some of these, and I want to go over some of the skills that you will need to solve for those. So first and foremost, what I want to do is this, okay? I want to go over what 1 point is. Okay, 1 point equals what? How do we figure out a point? So whether it's a discount point, an origination fee point, things like that. 1% of the loan. Yeah, 1% of the loan. Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Whether they're talking about a point in regards to discounting. So what is discounting? Just so that I know that you guys know what that is. Okay. What is discounting when they're talking about that? When they're saying, hey, they have to pay a discount point. What happens when they have to pay a discount point? So a discount point, what that actually does is this. It actually, you're paying something up front to lower the overall interest rate. So the total interest rate of a loan, okay, basically, yeah, it's kind of like prepaid interest. That's really what it is. That's what you're doing. You're lowering the interest rate. You don't need to know how much you're lowering the interest by. That's not relevant to what you would need to know for the test. And keep that in mind, guys. A lot of the stuff that you would see is going to be stuff that you would need to basically just know some surface level stuff for the test. So like mortgage points, just know that it's any point, whether it's discount, origination fee, stuff like that, is 1% of the loan, okay? So the next one, So, Yvette, if you ask me a question about the lender's yield, I'd be able to answer it potentially. But that's not a yield question, like a lender's yield question. It's typically not going to be something that you would see on the test, as far as my experience is concerned. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is this. So, I'm going to say, I'm going to cross off that. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into a basic overview of each one of these and then go into practicing with some questions, kind of go into real life scenarios. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, and this is a little different way of me doing this, I'm going to give you kind of like what you have to do. Then what we're going to do is start applying these in some manner, shape, or form, okay? So there's a lot of formulas, there's a lot of things that we're going to go over, and I want to get the nitty gritty out of the way first, and then help you guys apply that information, okay? So what we did just now was we went over, okay, the discount point. So I'll bring it back up here so that it's crossed out properly. There we go, okay? So we went over discount points. Now, who could tell me what capitalization rate is? So what is cap rate? Okay. This is something that's going to be used in the income approach to value, okay? So what is the income approach to value? That's something with our appraisals. Okay, that's something with our appraisals. Okay, that's something with our appraisals. So this is going to be for property investments. So this is going to be something that we're going to use for usually our commercial properties, right? So an appraiser is going to use the income approach in our commercial properties, all right? So what happens is this. When we're evaluating a commercial property, we're going to use the cap rate formula. And does anyone know what the cap rate formula is? Like how we remember what the cap rate is of a property, like how we figure out those problems? Just type in the chat if you remember like the acronym that we use, okay? So we are going to, we are going to use net operating income. That's going to be one component to it, okay? But what is the formula that we would use here? Price divided by rate? Not 100% there. Let me show you. What I always think of is this, okay? The cap rate, okay? I always think of this. Uncle Irv wears a cap. Uncle Irv wears a cap, okay? And I always think of it as one of those like little Boston Scully caps, okay? So what does that mean? That means income divided by the cap rate equals value. Income divided by value equals cap rate. Cap rate multiplied by value yields income, okay? Yields the income. So what happens is this. You have a situation where in a cap rate problem, okay, when you're doing capitalization rate, if they're asking you to find the value, you would be dividing the income by the rate, okay? If they are asking you to find the cap rate, you would divide the income by the value. If you need to find the income, that is going to be the rate times the value. So typically what happens is this. An appraiser, when they're sitting there scratching their heads and saying, how do I come up with the value of the property? And they say it's a commercial property, so I'm going to use the cap rate. They would say to them, okay, I have to figure out the value. So I know I would be dividing the income by the cap rate. So you're probably saying to me, Stu, how do they figure out the cap rate? Okay. And then some of you might say, well, it's income divided by value, but he doesn't know the value, silly. That's right. The appraiser doesn't know the value. So what happens is we have to come here with a certain level of estimation. And remember, an appraisal is an estimate of value. So the hardest part of the income approach is actually figuring out what the cap rate is. So the appraiser is going to estimate a cap rate. Okay, he might also estimate an income because the income of the property might not be known. If it's a newer property, if it's newly rented out, or it hasn't been rented out yet, it's vacant, okay? He might be estimating the income as well. but the cap rate he is definitely going to be estimating, because how they come up with the cap rate, okay, how we come up with the cap rate is this. It is the income divided by the value. So since we don't know the value, the appraiser is trying to solve for that typically, we're going to make sure that we come up with, as an appraiser, the cap rate that we think would be most appropriate. So how would they come up with that? Again, it's an estimate. So what they might do is look at other properties, look at what the cap rate is, because here's the thing. If I look at another property that is maybe sold, now it might not be exactly the same. And that's why they don't use the comparable method, the sales comparison or the market data approach for commercial properties, because they're too dissimilar. Okay, they're too dissimilar. Because if you think about it, think in your head about the real estate properties, the commercial properties in your town. Okay, so picture them. You're driving through town, you see your Walmart, that's a shopping plaza. Okay, that's one shopping plaza. Then you see another one where you have your Target, maybe one where you have the gym you go to, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and what happens is this. You'll have a situation where each one of them, and think in your head, each one of them is extremely different. Maybe some are a little similar to others, but as far as location, style, size, all of that, let's say all of those commercial properties sold in your area, they would still be too dissimilar to one another for the appraiser to use the sales comparison approach, okay? So what's going to happen is the appraiser is going to use this income approach and use typically the capitalization rate. So what happens is he's going to look at other properties and estimate a cap rate. Now, he typically will know the income or the estimated income, but he could also potentially estimate the income as well. And then once he has that, he would be able to come up with a value, okay? So really what the cap rate is, if we're actually looking at it, is a relationship represented numerically by the income and the value. So guys that are with me on the chat, does that make sense? Do you see that? Do you sit here and that's why I wanted to leave this formula up for a little bit so that you can kind of look at it. Uncle Irv, where's the cap? So if we're doing cap rate problems, we have to go to Uncle Irv, I over R times V. And I'll show you where you actually apply that, okay? So we'll be doing some cap rate problems, okay? Next one, let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to erasey, okay? So as I erasey, I'm going to still let my gums flap because I like doing that, okay? Keeps us moving and grooving so that we make the most of our time. Let's talk about property taxes with millage. Property taxes with millage, okay? So let me ask you this. How do I figure out my annual property taxes? So how do I figure out my property taxes, okay? Also known as my ad valorem taxes. How do I figure those out? What is the formula that I use? Like what is that? That's going to be the assessed value multiplied by the tax rate. Now, the tax rate is represented a couple different ways, okay? Sometimes it's represented as they'll call it, it's at a rate of $4 per 100, okay? Per 100. Sometimes they'll say it's, I've seen 55 cents per 500, okay? That's a nice low one. I want to live there, right? Then I've seen other ones where they say 63 mills. So what is a mill? What is a mill? What is a mill? Who knows what that is? And I hope you don't mind. I take a little 5-second break every once in a while. So that's why I ask you guys those questions, so that it gives me a chance to take a little sippy of water. Keeps my mouth nice and moist, so that I don't have to worry about the situation with my mouth getting dry and throat getting sore and all that kind of stuff from talking for so long. So it's $1 of the tax for each 1,000 of the assessment. Yep. So a mill is 1/1000. Okay. So basically what we're looking at here is it's either going to be, so if you ever see millage, okay, if you ever see millage, understand that all we're doing is it's that number over 1,000. So that's what it is. And actually, I'm going to give you a little tip, a little trick, a little, hey, how you doing? So you ready? Here's what it is. Whenever you see per, treat that as a division symbol. So you can actually get a numerical tax rate by dividing 55 cents by 500 and get one tax rate. $4 per 100, you could divide 4 by 100 and get one number that you could multiply by the assessed value, okay? 63 mils, 63 1,000ths, okay? And you could get a number you could multiply by the tax rate. Does that make sense? I mean, by the assessed value. Does that make sense, guys? So treat per as a division symbol, okay? Because that's super easy. I always, whenever I see per, I go, yes, 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 ma'am. I'm going to divide, okay? So let's keep moving and grooving, shall we? So math isn't so painful right now. We haven't gotten into the questions yet. We're just sitting here doing a couple of interesting things that will help us prepare for when we do a question. Because here's the thing with the questions. No matter if you understand how we get to something, what the process is, the numbers and the words don't matter. The numbers and the words don't matter, because here's the thing. I write math questions, okay? So I could write you a question on anything, okay? I could write you a question on absolutely anything. But what happens is this. When it comes to knowing the steps you take to get there, once you know that, no one could beat you, okay? And some of them are really long, but what happens is it has nothing to do with really trying to weed out all the extra stuff. It has to do with, sitting there and seeing what you have and what it is that what journey you're going to take to get there, okay? So the next one is a profit problem. A profit problem. So how they usually word profit problems is this, okay? They usually say, okay, I have more than I started with, okay? And we need a smiley face for that, because if we say that we have more than what we started with, bang, bang, boogie, woogie, we got ourselves a good time, okay? That's a good day at the casino. If we have more than what we started with, that's a good day's work, okay? So profit is amazing. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If I say, let's say 500 equals, 6% more than what I started with, here's what happens. What we're saying there is 500 represents 106% of what I started with, of one of the answers. So understand this. More than means 100% plus whatever it's more than. Okay, so if we say 6% more than, then that number is representative of 106% of the original number. So what we could do is we could multiply each of the numbers by 106% and see which one gives us 500, or we could do the opposite to the 500 and divide it by 106% and get our answer. Okay, and we'll see a math problem that will contain profit in it. Okay, and what I'm going to ask you to do while you're following along with me is tell me what steps we are going to take to get to the desired result that we need. Okay, so that's a profit problem. Also, if you see less than, okay, just like we said, more than is 100% plus, less than is 100% minus. So imagine this. If I said $500 is a 6% loss from what I started with, then that means, okay, listen, don't do this. This is a common error that people make with profit problems. They see 500 equals 6% more than what I started with. So what I'm going to do is multiply the 500 by 6%. Buzzer, wrong, not the right answer. okay? Because then you're not going to get to the right way. So what you need to understand is when we say it is 6% more, it is 106% of what you started with. Everyone made that problem because, and here's the thing too, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to really explain this, but you guys, if you guys get lost on a math question, your modus operandi, your favorite default position is, I'm going to multiply numbers together. Okay. So you would do Tom, you would do 500 divided by 106%. So watch what I would show you in a profit problem, because here's what it sounds like. I'm going to give you some high school algebra. You ready? Whatever our number is, our answer, it would be, remember how we used to do algebra where we would have to isolate for X? We didn't know X. So watch this, 106%, okay, X, meaning that 106% times X equals 500. So how do you isolate X? And I'm doing high school algebra. And again, if that's melting your brain, don't worry, go take a potty break. So you have to get X alone, right? So what you do is you divide each side by 106%. So that's how you come up with the divide by 106%. That would give you what the answer is. Okay, same thing with a less than problem. It would be 100% minus. So if it was minus 6%, we would say that it's 94% X would give you 500. And then what you do is you isolate X by itself by dividing each side by 94%. Okay, so that's our profit problem. Feel more than confident about letting you go out into the wild and do a profit problem after that. Okay, that's a quick little buzzer beater. And here's the thing, what I'm going to tell you is this. Again, keep in mind, within 24 hours, for those of us who are watching live, you are going to get the ad-free version of this. So you could watch, each one of these sections and just go, okay. And here's the thing too, you could just fast forward and see where I cross things off. Okay. So if it's less than, it's whatever less than 100, right? Because if I say to you, I made 6% less than, if I said $500, and I'm going to write it out just one more time, 500 is 6% less than what I started with, then what happens is we would understand that is, so someone multiplied 94% by one of our answers and then got 500. Yep. So more than profits, 100% plus, right? Because when I go out to Atlantic City or Las Vegas with my old man and I go, I made 125% on the day, that means that I got enough money for dinner. That means that I'm good. I'm treating. I got the drinks. Yeah, right? So that means I'm paying. I got this. That's typically, listen. I bought a couple of LCD and plasma TVs. And if you see the really pretty chandelier at the Borgata in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the one that's really, really bougie, I probably paid for at least half of that. So I've donated to the church. So let's talk about a seller net problem, though. Let's talk about a seller net problem. So what a seller net problem is this, okay? Seller net is when they say seller wants to net, let's just say 10,000, okay? He owes 50,000 on his mortgage, okay? And he wants to include a 6% commission to broker Stu, okay? What price does he need to sell it for? Now, again, I'm not going to show you with numbers necessarily, okay? Even though I'm using some numbers here, I want you to understand and recognize that you have a situation where you are going to understand the process that we're going to do to get you to where you need to be. So, objective 1, add your numbers up. Whatever numbers you have, you're going to typically add them up in a seller net problem. You're going to typically add them together. So you're talking 50K. plus 10K, okay? And then what happens is that would typically leave you with a number, okay? And in this situation, it would leave you with 60,000, okay? But that's not everything, okay? Because the seller says they want to net something and they owe 50,000 on a mortgage. So basically, minimally, so here's how the question reads to me, how I'm interpreting this. Minimally, he needs 60,000. But what more do you need? So here's where people usually do. They usually take the 60,000 and they don't understand what that is. So what they're going to do is they then multiply it by 0.06. They go, I need to find out 6% of that. No, naughtiness. That number represents the number that you need after the commissions. So would it be 106%? No, that's a profit question. Otherwise, we would have called this a profit question. But that's a good, you're not far off. You ready? You're not far off. So think about it. We have X right over here. So we're going to have 4 numbers. Okay, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one of them, so each one of them represents what the sale price could be. Now, something you could do is this. You could subtract 6% from each one of them. But that's the same thing as saying 94%. So this 60,000 is 94% of one of those numbers. So you could multiply each one of these by 94%, or just like we did before in our algebraic equation, you could divide the 60,000 by 94% to get your answer. That is the situation, because what happens is each one of those answers, so if that's the answer, if you just did the math with right there, that it's $63,829.78, fantastic. The goal of this wasn't to necessarily get to that, but it was to get you to understand what the answer is. Well, I haven't done the math myself because I literally just made these numbers up. So let me just do the math just so that I don't say, oh, yeah, that's a number. Sure, absolutely. Because here's another thing, too. I want to tell you, be wary of, that is, you did your math right. Be wary of the Butterfingers. What are the Butterfingers? The Butterfingers are when you're having a situation where you're punching it into the calculator, okay? And what happens is this. You sit there, punch it into the calculator, and all of a sudden you get a number that is not any number that you see up on the screen. So then you're like, I'm going to multiply more numbers together. That's what I'm going to do. And that's everyone's default position. Don't do that. Don't do that. I want you to understand, and that's why what we're doing now is, instead of me getting into the questions right away, because on my last webinar, I did, oh my God, let's jump right into questions. And then I was like, no, let's build some building blocks. Let's do that. So now what we're doing is building some foundation for us to understand how we're going to tackle some of these questions. So that is the situation there in regards to what you're typically going to see on a seller net problem. Does that make sense? So you're adding up a bunch of numbers, and then you're going to be subtracting the percentage from it, okay? And then basically dividing by that, okay? And we'll see it live in another question as well. But are there any questions, concerns, burning desires on that while I just take a quick sippy of some water? It's actually Diet Dr. Pepper. I love bubbles. Yeah, so you always add up what they want, and then so basically in a seller net, you always add up what numbers what I refer to as, Tom, when I refer to like the 10,000 and the 50,000, I refer to those as the hard numbers. Okay, so if it says the seller wants to net, you know that this is this process you're going to do. You're going to say, okay, the end number, if they're asking you what price does it need to sell for, that's a seller net problem. That's what that is. 100%. 6, 7 ways to Sunday, absolutely. So let's look at proration. Proration. And guys, these are typically our debits and our credits, okay? Our debits and our credits. Oh my gosh, okay? There's two things that we need to know. We need to know about paying in advance and paying in arrears, okay? Paying in advance and paying in arrears. So what do I mean by paying in advance and paying in arrears? So and here's the thing, just so you know, what I'm going to give you in regards to the proration is absolute 100%. You can take it to the bank every single day. Okay. There is no problem that you will have this and you cannot apply what I'm going to tell you to it. Okay. Because it is the same. Okay. So if you remember this, you'll be fine, because there is no scenario that you could give me where it's going to be other than that. If a bill is paid in advance, that means it's paid ahead through a date. Okay. It could be annual, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, whatever it is, paid in advance. Okay. So if they say, hey, they paid for the month in advance, whoever paid for that month, and typically when we're talking about real estate and closings, the person who would have paid in advance would be the seller. Okay. So the seller typically pays for something in advance, whether that be taxes, whether that be a water bill, whether that be a sewage bill, whatever the case may be, something is paid in advance. So that means, and I'm going to do a little draw. Okay. That means that, let's say that's a timeline. Let's say that that's 2020. Okay. The most wonderful year ever known to man. 2020 is there. The seller paid for it here through that whole time. So what happens is, pick a date, any date, I don't care what it is. Let's say they close there. Okay. Whatever that date is, the seller is responsible for this time. The seller, unless the question states otherwise, okay? Unless the question states otherwise, it is always the responsibility of the buyer for closing day. Closing day is always the responsibility of the buyer. Also, we prorate on a 360 calendar day year, okay? And 30 day in the month year, okay? 30 days in the month. That's referred to as a banking calendar, okay? So if we go by, unless they say otherwise, if not, the closing day is the responsibility of the buyers, okay? So if you're trying to figure out whose responsibility is what, and again, unless the question states otherwise, if you have to be in assumptive mode, you always assume 360 calendar year, okay, 30 days in the month, and closing date responsibility of the buyer. Those are assumptions that are what you should be going in there with in regards to your prorations, okay? So if the seller has paid in advance, then from the day of closing to the end of the year, or till the end of the month, or whatever the period is that has been paid in advance, the buyer will be debited and the seller will be credited for this time, okay? Debit the buyer, credit the seller. So if I close November 2020, I'm only paying for November and December. Yes, if the seller has paid in advance, okay? So if it's in advance, do we count the buyer's days? Very good question. If they're asking you, what is the buyer going to be charged, or who owes what, that would be the buyer needs to be debited. You need to include the day of closing as responsibility of the buyer, and then credit that to the seller. Debit is a charge, credit is a plus. Plus credit, minus debit, okay? Make sense? And that's always from here to Timbuktu. You could take that to the bank. You could take everything I just said. So if you're like, oh man, I want to hear that again, you'll hear that on the recording. Okay. So just basically, you know, a short while after you see sell or net crossed off, go right into, you could hear me going into the debits and credits like this. Okay. So now let's talk about arrears. So this means it's paid for time that has happened. Okay, for time that has happened. Okay. And that again is annual, monthly, whatever the case may be. It's for time that has happened. Now, arrears typically means that it hasn't been paid yet. So if this was the great year of 2020, then what happens is this. We're going to close. You see how the arrow is going backwards? Okay. So what happens is that means that the buyer is going to be responsible for this because they're going to be in the home at the time that the bill is due. So what happens is we have to see the closing date and then take the seller's responsibility. So that would be without the day of closing. So the seller's responsibility, and we would have to debit the seller, credit the buyer, because the buyer is going to owe that at the end of the period, whether that's the year, the month, whatever the case may be. Basically, what happens is the seller has enjoyed a service or has enjoyed something and has yet to pay for it, and they won't be billed for it because they're selling the property and the buyer is going to be responsible for that. Does that make sense, guys? Give me a big thumbs up, smiley face. Let me know how that works for you. Yeah, that works out great. Okay. So the buyer owes the seller in advance and the seller owes the buyer in arrears. Yeah. Because here's the thing, in arrears, the seller's not going to be in the home when the bill is due. Right? Seller's not going to be in the home when the bill is due. In advance, okay, yes, child support is paid in arrears, okay? In advance, okay, Tom, how do I find out for my closing? They are going to give you, there are powers that be, your title company is probably going to give you a closing disclosure about 5 days before your closing, and it will give you all the debits and credits, and if there's any prorations for anything that has to be done, there will be prorations. And here's the thing, great thing, beautiful thing is this. If it is a monthly in advance, it's going to be a debit to you, credit to the seller, okay? If it is monthly or annually in arrears, it'll be a credit to you, debit to the seller, okay? So that's the situation there. And there's always stuff that you're going to have that are going to run like that, okay? So that's good stuff to know. That's good stuff to know. So we got done prorations, okay? We're moving and grooving. You guys are doing fantastic tonight. Look at you guys. It's late at night when we're recording this, but that's okay because you guys are doing fantastic. I'm loving it. Ba, 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 ba. Let's do area of something. So I'm going to do two different area problems. First one that I'm going to do is what is the square footage of a square or a rectangle? Square or rectangle? What do we do? Okay, we are going to run into a situation where we're doing length times width or side multiplied by side. Yep, so length times width, side by side, okay? Now, let me show you my amazing drawing skills. Let's talk about a triangle, okay? So can I do this with frontage? What do you mean, can you do this with frontage? I don't understand that question. Do you want to know what frontage is? I mean, frontage is easy. Frontage or front foot is usually, so let's say I had a road right here. Let's say this was my road, okay? The frontage is whatever abuts up to, okay, up to the road. So what happens is this, they'll typically give you a question, okay, where you'll figure out they'll ask you for what they'll give you in this, and it's a simple area question. It is. They'll give you one side, okay? Now let me change the color here. They'll give you one side, okay? Plus, they'll give you, okay? They'll give you one side plus the area, okay? Plus the area of it. And what they'll want you to do is they'll say, hey, what is the frontage of this property? Okay, they'll give you the depth, okay, or the length, and you have to figure out the width. That's typically what they'll do. Also, keep in mind, too, it might not necessarily, because some of you guys think that it's always going to be a situation where the lot is going to be deeper than it is wide. That might not be the case. What happens is this: the frontage on the house might actually be wider than what you have. So if they're giving you an equation where they're looking for you to solve for frontage, all it is just basically solving for one side of the house. Okay, that's a situation with that, and we'll go over a question like that. Actually, what I'll do is this. Let me ask you this: how many square feet are in an acre? How many square feet are in an acre? Oh man, you guys are good. How many square feet are in an acre? Are going to be 43,560. How I remember this is this: 4 old men driving 35 and a 60. Or some of you guys do this, where you add up this and it comes to 7. You add these two numbers and you get 11. And some people says 7-Eleven has donuts. Okay. 4 35-year-old women driving 60 miles per hour. Okay. If you like that one, I was like 4 old men driving 35 and a 60. That was made me laugh. So I always thought that was humorous. However, I said 4 35-year-old women driving 60 miles per hour. I always like 4 old men in a car. I prefer that rather than the 7-Eleven method, because some people who are, especially if you're like dyslexic at all, sometimes what happens is people will juxtapose or switch up some of the numbers. They'll put 34,065. They'll do something like that because they're just adding up two numbers that equal it. Okay. In mine, how I like the 4 old men driving 35 and a 60, I like that better because it gives you an opportunity to really understand how the numbers go in a line. Okay. It gets you your chronology that you're missing. All right. So here's what I'm going to say. So let's talk about this. Okay. I'm going to give you a lot. Okay. So Tom, I'm going to do your frontage question. You ready? The lot is 5 acres. Okay. Now, the depth is 300. Okay. The depth is 300. What is the frontage on this property? So I'll even give you a little street. I'll go chuk, 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 chuk. Street. That's a street. Okay. So what is our first step going to be? And I'm going to actually write it down over here so that we could solve together for this. Okay. So what's our first step going to be? Guys, tell me in the chat what you think our first step's going to be to solving for this. We're trying to solve for the frontage again. So Tom, this is your frontage question. So we're going to multiply. So Yvette says we're going to multiply 43,560 by 300. Well, not necessarily by 300. What we're going to do is this, okay? We're going to take the 5 acres, okay? Because here's the thing. Now, I didn't add this one thing in here to make this easier. This is 300 feet. That makes it a lot clearer because you guys aren't mind readers, and I was thinking that in my head, and I don't know if I said it out loud. So we're going to multiply the 5 acres, okay? Right, because what happens is this. If I give it to you in different numbers, so that's what they'll typically do. They'll typically give you an area problem with 2 different measurements, like acres and feet, okay? So you have to take the 5 acres and convert it into feet and multiply it by 43,560. So what would that get you, guys? What would that get you? So 5 acres, okay, times 43,560 should get you 217,800. Now, what would you do with that to find the frontage? What would you do with that to find the frontage? Divide it by 300, right? Because 300 times a number times this is going to give you the 5 acres, which is 217,800. So if you divide 217,800 divided by 300, you would get what as far as the length, the width. It's going to be a wide one. You get the front foot. So that should come out to 726. See how that worked? See how that made it happen? That's usually what they're going to tell you. Also, too, something else to understand about front foot or frontage, okay? That is what they're going to figure out how you figure out the special assessment taxes, okay? How you figure out the special assessment taxes. Special assessment taxes always go by the front foot or frontage, okay? So when I say frontage, it just means what's abutting up to the road, okay? The front line of the home, the frontage, okay? So whether it's wide, whether it's long, whether it's shallow, whatever the case may be, I'm talking about what abuts to the road. Okay, because here's the thing: they could give you a map on the test and say to you, okay, here's the road, here's this, here's that, and they won't label everything. They'll just say we're solving for the frontage. So you don't know, is it that one, is it this one, what the case may be. So it might be a little confusing for you if you don't know how to properly identify which one the frontage is. But that's that. Now, let's talk about how we find the area of a triangle. How do we find the area of a triangle, guys? Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm still a big kid at heart. You ready? I love me some grilled cheese sandwiches. It is not the length times width times height. No. And I love grilled cheese sandwiches when you cut off the crust and you cut it into little triangles. It tastes better when they're cut into triangles. So if I know the area of a square is the two sides multiplied by together, then I know that this side multiplied by this side divided in half will give me the area of a triangle. So they sometimes refer to it as 1/2 the base times the height. So 1/2 the base multiplied by the height. That would give you the area of that. Now let me show you cubic, because understand this, we've been dealing with right now two-dimensional objects, right? We've been dealing with two-dimensional objects. We have not dealt with a 3D object. So this is going to be my attempt at drawing you a 3D object, okay? So this right here is a cube, okay? So we know that if we multiply one side by another side, okay, we are going to get the area. So we would get that, the flat dimension of it. But what we also need to know is we need to know basically the volume of it. So what it would be is this. It would be, and I'm actually going to erase a little bit, okay? It's going to be the side multiplied by the side multiplied by the height. So it's going to be the area multiplied by the height. Do you see that? So I'm going to circle in green the measurements you're going to take. You're going to take that one, you're going to take that one, and you're going to take that one, and you're going to multiply them all together to get cubic feet, to get the volume of something. You take the flatness, okay? So I'm going to outline it in like a dark green now. So you get this, which would give you the area, okay? Then you get the height. Do you guys see that? Do you see how that works? How the cubic feet work versus square feet? Okay. So it's a little different. You get a much bigger number. So how would you potentially see that on the test? That's going to be usually seen on the test as something that would give you the cubic feet. So like the total volume, okay? Because in every other one, keep in mind, we're talking about square feet. So we're talking about two-dimensional, right? We're talking about two-dimensional. And typically, when we're looking at square footage for a property, we just want to know the two-dimensional length and width and like area of the property. What is the square footage of this room? You typically don't need to know the cubic feet unless it's like a commercial building and they're saying, okay, it's 5 stories high. You know, each level is, 7 feet high. Okay. And we're going to be building at like the cost per cubic feet they would be talking about then. Okay. So what happens is they need to know the height as well, because when you're building some of those larger structures, they take into consideration the cubic feet. So that's something you could know that I just like throwing in there because I think it's easy to understand. But at the same token, it is something that you don't usually see in your textbooks. So any questions, concerns, burning desires so far? Because we're moving and grooving. Yeah, you typically don't see cubic feet in the book, but what happens is some building projects require cubic feet. Um, Next one, the amortization table. Okay, amortization table. Can I give an example of this? Basically, they would ask you to just multiply. They would give it to you just like I said to you, where they would have you. They would ask you the cubic feet of something, and they would give you a length and a width and a height. And it's the same thing. You just multiply the 3 numbers together to get that. So let me share with you an amortization table so you could see it. Okay, so that you could see it. So can everyone see my screen right now? Can everyone see what I got up on my screen? Yes. Okay. So what we're looking at right here is an amortization table. So those of you who are with me, can you tell me what an amortization table shows you? What are we looking at here? What are we looking at in an amortization table here? So what we're looking at, just so you know, so this is, someone said interest payments. Okay, so we could be looking at interest payments. We could be, okay. No, you cannot Google it and print it out. And I would advise you to not have, if you're doing an online test, okay, I would advise you that if you're doing any kind of things like that, listen, they are very strict with the online testing. So what I would recommend is that you do not print anything out and have it there, okay? So what I would recommend is that you do understand that, ask them first when you're doing this, okay? Ask them for the amortization table, okay? So that is the situation there, okay? So this is a schedule of payments, and also every amortization table is different depending on the factors that they use, okay? But that's something you don't need to know, okay? This shows both principal and interest, okay? This shows both principal and interest unless you're doing an interest-only loan, okay? So this is every monthly payment per $1,000. So if you had a $1,000 loan, this would be your monthly payments for however many years it is, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, at whatever interest rate you're approved for. So if they're talking about a 20-year at 3% interest, then every single month is going to be 5.54598, and that will be the principal and interest. Now, that is not necessarily the taxes and insurance of the property, okay? That is not necessarily the taxes and the insurance on the property, but that is the situation in regards to the principal and the interest for every $1,000 on a mortgage. Does that make sense, guys? So if you had a $2,000 mortgage, you would multiply that by 2. If you had an $80,000 mortgage, that's 81,000. You would multiply it by 80, okay? And you would find the principal and the interest, okay? So what I'm going to do is this, okay? I'm going to simply write down right now that number. So it's 5.54598. And I'm going to ask you 2 questions because I think that that's important. It's indicative of what you know, what you've learned, all that kind of stuff. So let's look at this. You ready? I'm going to do a new share. We're going to go back to our whiteboard. Okay, there we go. So the number that I was mentioning was 5.54598. And that was a 20-year at 3%. Okay. I want you to tell me what is the most that I could afford if my monthly budget is $1,750. Okay. So I come to you, I say, hey, and you're my real estate agent. I want you to answer this, not my loan officer. Okay. I want you to figure this out for me. And I say to you, hey, I could only afford $1,750 a month. What's the most I could afford in regards to a home? So how would you solve for that? How would you figure that out, guys? What would we do? What would we do there? So the first step we're going to do, I'll help you out, okay? The first step we're going to do is we're going to divide. Who wants to take a guess what we're going to divide? So it's a division problem. We're not going to multiply 1750 by 1750 because that's our monthly budget. That's how much I could figure it out. Not because here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Not 1750 times 12 because here's the thing. I'm not going to divide it by 20 years. We're going to divide it by 5.54598. Why? Why would we do something crazy like that? Because I told you this was every monthly payment per $1,000 of the loan. So we need to figure out how many of those could fit into our monthly budget. How many of those could fit? How many of these monthly payments could fit into our monthly budget? So that being said, okay, what's that number? What is that number? We're going to take that monthly budget, divide it by 5.54598, and it's going to give us 315.54. Okay, so if you divide 1750 by 5.54598, be careful of those butterfingers. It'll get you every time. It'll get you every time. And then what's the next step that we're going to do? What do you think is the last step we're going to do? Because we're at the last step. Multiply it by what? Not by 20 years, because here's the thing. We're already working with a monthly amount, okay? We're not going to multiply it by 12. We're going to multiply the 315.54 by 1,000 because we're already dealing with the monthly payments per $1,000 of a mortgage. So remember I told you if I have a $2,000 mortgage, we would multiply that by 2. By 2. If it's a $3,000 mortgage, $4,000 mortgage. Now what I'm telling you is this. I know how much I could afford. I know what my monthly nut to crack is going to be. That's $1,750. I need to figure out how many of these payments, okay, how many of these payments fit into that, okay? So what I need to do is figure that out, divide it, then that's how many. 315.54 is how many monthly payments per 1,000 I could afford. So what happens is I then multiply it by 1,000, and you should get 315,540. Okay. So when I first divide, what do I type into the calculator? This is the equation. So it'll be 1,750 divided by 5.54598. You need to know how many of those payments fit into the monthly budget. So that is how you would solve with a monthly budget. Now, let me give you another one. You ready? Okay. So what if someone asks that all they could afford is $1,500 a month? How do you solve? Substitute the 1,750 for 1,500. It's the same process. Figure out how many times you could fit the monthly payment into it. Okay. So what happens is this: you get the 1,500 divided by, that's not the rate, just so you know, that's the monthly payments per $1,000 of a loan. Hence why once we figure out how many of them fit into it, we multiply by 1,000. Okay? Because here's the thing. When we find that number from the amortization table, the price of the term of the loan has already been baked into the cake. The interest and principal has already been baked into the cake. So that's all already baked in there. Okay. So that's the answer right there. It would be 315,540. Okay. So let's keep moving and grooving, because that's an amortization table. Okay. All right. Let's do this one. And you guys are already super smart. Look at you guys doing other questions already. So now amortization table's gone. Okay. Now our final type of question that we're going to have is a commission question. And I think you guys are ready to tackle the actual questions, because I'm going to show you the commission question in a form that you would normally see. So what happens is this. Without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into some questions and how they're going to word them on the test, and how they might be a little trickier than what you would see on the test. I mean, as a straight up regular question. So we're going to take it step by step as we're going through these questions. What I want you to do is this. I want you to ask me if you have any questions, okay? And that's how we're going to wrap up today. We're going to put into practice all the stuff that we've already learned, all the good stuff, okay? So let's go over to the questions that I have prepared for us. So can you guys all see my screen? Yes, awesome sauce. So let's look at this one. And I like this one. I wrote this one the other day, and I like it a lot, okay, because it's confusing. So Brad Pitt, an agent at Stu's brokerage, made $4,700 in October. If he only sold one home and Stu's brokerage took in 2.5% of the sale price, what was the price of the home if Brad Pitt was on a 40% split? Good old Brad is working for me now. So what would we do first? And I think that that's always the most difficult question to ask, okay? What is our first step? What is our first step, okay? So someone said $4,700 multiplied by 2.5%. Well, I don't know about that, okay? It's a good, listen, I like that you're trying something. I like that you're giving me some sort of, look, trying is half the battle. Here's what it's going to be. So the 4,700 is the very, 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 very last step. So what did we multiply to get to 4,700? What did we multiply to get there? We multiplied something by what? We multiplied two numbers together. One of them you know, one of them you don't know. Not necessarily the sales price. I don't think we're there yet. Okay. Not necessarily the sales price, because we don't know the sale price, right? So that's like our last step. So Brad Pitt's split was 40%. So what happened was this. We multiplied something by 0.4 because that's the decimal numerical representation of 40%, right? So again, I'm going to use the algebraic equations on this because here's what happened. 0.4% times something gave us Brad Pitt's $4,700. So what our first step is going to be is to divide the 4,700 by 40%. Okay, so we're going to take the 4,700 and divide it by 40% because there was some number that was multiplied by 40% to get that number. So 0.4. So we're going to take 4,700 divided by 0.4. And that's going to give us what? 11,750. Now, how did they get that number? So what was that number representative of? Does anyone know? Anyone want to take a stab at it? So what 11,700 was, so think about this. So Yvette, wasn't this Brad's commission? Okay. So Sherry, yeah, absolutely. This is a percentage of the sales price, right? So what was that? That was 2.5%. So it's 0.025x equals 11,750. Now that X is the sales price. Because remember, think about this. Stu's brokerage took in 2.5%. So what you have to do is you're basically reverse engineering this. What happened was, here's how the problem looks moving forward. Like if we were going in the right direction, we would take the sale price, multiply it by 2.5%. It would give us the commission. Then we would multiply the commission by 0.4%, which was Brad's take. So now, do you see how, and we would have gotten 4,700. Now, what we have to do is basically, we have to work backwards. So that's why instead of multiplying by, so we have to go from here all the way up to here. So we have to divide by 0.4 and then divide that number by 0.025. So what would you guys get if you did that, if you did that math? Anyone do it yet? I'll do it. I'll go ahead and I'll get that on my calculator. So we got 11,750 divided by 0.025 equals 470,000. So 470,000 is the answer there. So do you guys see how we got there? So this was a difficult commission question, but what you need to do is this. Don't start multiplying things together. Don't start multiplying and dividing and going, wee. That doesn't help you get to the answer you need to get to. You have to understand, okay, how you get to a certain thing. And yeah, it's hard. It's very hard working backwards, right? Because everyone's easier if I said to you, a home was sold for 400,000. Tell me what 2.5% commission would be. I think that all of you guys would be able to do that in like 30 seconds. But what I want to show you is a more difficult, more complex commission question that you might be asked on the test. A style like this would be something that personally, if I was writing the test, I would write something like that as a commission question, because that causes you to critically think. It is not straightforward and easy, okay? So, yeah, and here's the thing. You're going to be able to look back at this and see how we got to that. So now we're going to be doing a tax rate problem. So let me read the problem. You ready? 120 Main Street was recently reassessed at an assessed value of $220,000. If the tax rate for the town was $4 per 100, what is the property's new annual tax? So guys, let's write that down in the let's figure out what our first step is. What is going to be our first step on this one? Okay? What is our first step? What is our first step? 220,000 times 0.04. That is a very good final step. So here's what I always do, and I told you this before. I said, because some of you might be thinking, where did the 0.04 come from? Well, remember I told you before, I said treat the per as a division symbol. So $4 divided by 100 would give you 0.04. And then you just have to multiply it by the 220,000 and boom. There you should get your answer. So let's just do this as far as 0.04 times 220, 8,800, okay? 8,800. Do you guys see how we did that? And now I know that that might seem very easy to you, but I want it to be easy. I want some of these questions to come to you a little easier, okay? Because again, if you use some of the tips and tricks that I'm showing you right now, you should be able to conquer some of the math that you might not have been able to before, okay? So I love this question, okay? Because, okay, this is a fantastic one, and this is a difficult one, and I want you to read this. You ready? Morgan Freeman decided to take out a home equity loan to pay for acting lessons from world-renowned voiceover artist Stu. The total principal of the loan was $20,000. His monthly payments are $197, and the interest is 7%. What are his monthly interest payments? What are we going to do here? So let's take inventory of what we have, okay? We have a $20,000 loan that he took out. We have monthly payments of $197, and we have an interest rate of 7%, okay? So you have an interest rate of 7%. We have monthly payments of $197, and we have the principal of the loan was $20,000. So he's paying Stu a lot of money, okay? This Stu must have a voice of an angel if Morgan Freeman is taking money out to learn from him, okay? 197 times 12, okay? So, So some of you guys are getting some different answers. Let's see what we're going to do. So let me ask you this question, and I have to ask this. Do we know what those monthly payments, what they are? Do we know anything about those monthly payments? Do we know if that's principal, if that's interest? What do we know about them? We know nothing about those monthly payments, right? We know nothing about them. We don't know the term of the loan. We don't know anything. We couldn't use an amortization table here. There is not enough information. There is not enough information for you to use the monthly payment. The monthly payment is just in there to see if you would start going down a road with that. So monthly payment, a red herring, doesn't mean anything. We have the principal and the interest. Let's multiply them together. Everyone would go down that road. Here's the thing, before you start plugging in numbers, understand, because here's the thing, that's like me sometimes, okay? Let me tell you what young Stu used to do. Young Stu used to get in the car, okay, because you have to understand, I was a product of, I went to high school in 2002. And that might sound like not too long ago for some of you. Then you might be like, oh, Stu, you're a spring chicken. But that was before Google even existed. And, you know, I have my mom in the chat here. My mom's in the chat. She would know that I would do this. I would just go out driving sometimes. I would go. I didn't have to have a destination. I would just be like, no, Mom, I could just go out and drive, because that was what cool kids did back in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was just, you drive and you didn't have a destination, and you would just kind of like meander around. Maybe you'd go to your girlfriend's house, see if her parents were home or not, that kind of thing. So we have $20,000 here. And here's the thing. If you're going to go down a road with some of your algebra, some of your equations, some of your math, okay, I want you to know why the heck are you multiplying it together? What are you looking to get? So when we do the 20,000 and we multiply it by 0.07, what does that give us? What does that yield us? Because understand that most home loans, okay, so it does give us 1,400. You're correct in saying that. Most home loans are on simple interest. Simple interest, if you multiply the principal by the interest, you would get the annual interest. So 1,400 is indicative of the annual interest. So go ahead. Tell me what our last step is now that I told you all that. I cheated for you. I gave you everything. But that's why I'm here. You divide it by 12, and what would you get of that? $116.66. Yep. I should change my numbers in there, because I don't know if I want to have all those sixes in there. Kind of like, ooh. It's my Italian grandmother giving me, telling me that there's a little superstition inside of me that's going, whoa, not good. I need to change the numbers up a little bit there. Okay. So I want to do some loan to value stuff. I want to do some of that. Okay. I want to do some of this stuff. And I'm going to ask you guys to help me with this, because this is a long, lengthy question, and I want you to look at it. I kind of had some fun with this one too. So let's take a look at this question. You ready? 13 Elm Street was listed for $130,000. The Voorhees family placed an offer for $13,000 below asking. And just so you know, not included in this question, it was accepted. So they got that accepted, okay? They were approved for a loan with an LTV of 85% from the Ray Savings and Loan Institute. The loan officer informed the Voorhees family that they would have to pay 7 points in loan origination fees. How much would they need to bring to closing, assuming all other closing costs are accounted for? So what are we trying to figure out here? This is a long question. So like, what is our end game? What is our end game here? What is our end game? Our end game is to find out how much money they need to bring to closing, right? Find out the closing costs. Okay, so Sherry, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you this. What is the closing cost going to consist of? What are the closing costs going to consist of? Because I'm going to put them right here. So we're going to talk about the fees. So that would be the fees that they have to collect. Okay, yes. So the closing costs would consist of the 7 points in origination fees. Okay, it would consist of the 17 points in the origination fees, and also the down payment, right? The down payment. So Tom put in the first step. I'm going to take his first step there because it's a good one. It's 130,000 minus 13,000. So what would that give us, Tom? Okay. What would 130,000, okay? 130,000 minus 13,000 gives us 117,000. So what is that? What is that 117,000? Okay. That's how much they paid for the home, right? That's how much they agreed to pay for the property. Okay. So now what do we need to figure out knowing that? Knowing that, what do we need to figure out? Okay. We need to figure out how much the loan is, right? So we're going to multiply 85% because it's an 85% loan to value. So what happens is this. So 117,000 times 0.85 would give you 99,450. So that was the loan amount. Okay, that was the loan amount, $99,450. So what would be our next step here? Now that we know the loan amount, the sale price, what would we do? What would you guys do? There's a couple ways. So Yvette said multiply the 7 points times the loan amount. So why don't we do that? What are the 7 points multiplied by the loan amount? So 99450 times 0.07, because it's 7%, right? 1 point is 1% of the loan. 6961.5. So we have 6961.5. Now, how do we figure out the down payment amount? How do we figure out the down payment amount? We would subtract the sale price minus the loan amount, right? So 117,000 minus 6961. Oh, nope. See, I already have Butterfingers. I'm subtracting the points that we just got. Okay, you see how easy it is to get distracted and just all of a sudden go down a rabbit hole. And I didn't do that on purpose at all. I did that literally out of yeah. So here's what it's going to be. You wouldn't add the points to the loan amount because those are origination fees. That is not, points are stuff that they have to pay at closing. Points are paid at closing. Okay. If they are paying points, it's paid at closing. So the amount that they would have to, is the down payment is $17,550. Is my math right on that, guys? Just double check me because I just had the case of the Butterfingers. Okay. So if you add those two numbers together, 17,550 plus 6961.5, it would equal $24,511.50. So let me write that down, and that should be our answer. Okay. So it should be $24,511.50. Okay. $24,511.50. Did you subtract? Nope, I added. So here's what happened. I subtracted the sale price. Okay. I subtracted the sale price. So this is what we did. We're going to recap the whole thing. You ready? First, we figured out the sale price. Then we multiplied it by 0.85 to get the loan amount, the $99,450. Then what you have to do is figure out the points. So you multiplied that by 0.07 because it's 7 points. And you would get $6,961.50. Then you have to find out the down payment. That is the sale price minus the loan amount. And that would give you $17,550. Then you add those two together because remember I told you that what they would have to bring to closing is going to consist of the origination fees, which are the points, and the down payment. You have to add them together, and that's how we would get $24,561.50. Does that make sense, guys that are with me? Give me a thumbs up. I'm going to have to watch that about 7 times because that's a long one. But once you figure out how to do it, there's nothing in there that's complicated. There's nothing in there that's complicated. It's just long. Okay. That's all there is to it. Okay. So from 117,000, you wouldn't subtract the 6. So here's the thing. The points are just extra. The points you don't need to add it. You don't need to. The points are just extra. When I say to you, you have to pay 2 points at closing, that is not going into the loan. That is not going into anything else. That is extra that you need to bring. Okay. So what happens is from the 117,000, you subtract so from the 117,000, you subtract the loan amount. Then what you do is that would yield you the down payment, and you just add that into the points. Okay? So I'm going to keep moving, guys, just so that we could get some other things in there. Yeah, because you guys could, like I said, you could watch this on recording. You could watch it over and over again. I don't mind. I don't care. I'll have this for you within 24 hours. So you can play around with it then. So let's see. I really like this question. This is a good one. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. Now, this requires an amortization table, but listen to what I'm going to tell you. Instead of going to the amortization table and figuring out how much the monthly payments per 1,000 are, what I did was I gave you that number already, okay? I gave you that number already. So you don't need to look at the table. I did that whole thing for you, so we don't have to switch back and forth. So let's read this question. It says Scott and Sylvia want to buy a house that is listed for $105,000. The seller accepts the offer they wrote for $5,000 less than list price. They have a 20% down payment and need to get a loan for 80% loan to value. Their lender offers them a 20-year mortgage at 3.5% interest rate, and that would yield you. So basically, you would go to the amortization table, go up, down, get that number, and this would be it, the 5.79960. Okay. The taxes are $1,490 per year, and the insurance is $480 per year. How much is their monthly PITI payment? Be sure to use the amortization table. Well, we already did that. So, guys, what is our first step going to be in this problem? Okay. What is our first step going to be in this problem? We got to subtract some things. Yeah, absolutely. So first thing that we would do, subtract, okay, subtract 105,000 minus 5,000, okay? Then, so that would be $100,000 sale price. Sale price. Now, what I will tell you is this. What is the next thing we have to do? We have to figure out the loan amount, right? We have to figure out how much the loan is going to be. So the loan is going to be, okay, $80,000, okay? The loan will be $80,000. Now that we know the loan, I need to figure out three things. I need to figure out the principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So how did we get the 80,000? That's 100,000 times 0.8. And so what I did was I skipped a step, okay? So because what happens is this, I did it in my head. I was cheating a little bit. So the 100,000 times 0.8, okay? And there's a reason why I made them easy numbers, okay? So this is the loan amount. I made them easy numbers so that I could do it in my head, okay? So that is the situation there. I made it really easy for us on that one. Now, here's what we have, okay? This is the situation in regards to this, okay? The $80,000 loan, and we now know the monthly payments. So what do we need to do? I know an $80,000 loan, and how would I find out the principal and interest payments if I went to the amortization table and I know how much the monthly payments are? So what would I so Sherry, what would I multiply by 80,000 by the 5.5 by the 5.79960? Not the loan amount, Because remember I told you, not 1,000, you're close. Remember I told you if I had a $1,000 loan for an amortization table, I would multiply it by 1. If it was a $2,000 loan, I would multiply it by 2. If it was an $80,000 loan, I would multiply the monthly payments by 80, right? I would multiply it by 80 because that payment right there, okay, is per 1,000. So we don't have 80,000 thousands. We have 81,000. So we would multiply it by 80. And it would be 5.79960. Okay. And let's see what that would be. Okay. 463.968. Okay. But let me ask you that. What is that number? What is this 463.968? What is that? That's our monthly payment of what? So when we use the amortization table, what is it showing us? The principal and interest. So we're missing two things. In PITI, what are we missing? Taxes and what else? We're missing taxes and insurance, right? Taxes and insurance, okay? We're missing taxes and insurance. We're missing the TI. So here's how I would find that. You ready? I would take the taxes and insurance and I would add them up because they're both annual numbers, 1490 plus 480. Add them up. There's nothing wrong with that. They don't fight. We're going to be added up anyway. So 480 plus 1490 equals 1970. Now, the 1970, what are we going to do with that number? I'm going to divide it by 12 to get a monthly number. Right. 1970 divided by 12 equals $164.17. And then add it to the 463,968 because that's the principal and interest. Right. Yep. We're going to add it to that. Perfect. What's the number going to get you? What answer would that be over here on the left-hand side? A. 628.14. 628.14. Okay. So do you guys see how I got there? Do you see how I got to that answer? Yeah. So again, longer questions don't necessarily mean harder. Longer basically means, hey, this is just going to be a couple more steps. Okay. So what we'll do is this. I want to do one more. So you add the taxes and the insurance. Yeah, I would do that if it's because they don't fight, right? They don't fight together. You know, they don't fight. So that's what I would do. Okay. We're going to do a cap rate problem. That's what I want to do next. I want to do a good old cap rate problem. I have a cap rate problem over here. See, this is my massive, massive math board. I do a lot of math. Okay. Love this math problem because this is such a simple cap rate problem, but it is the cap rate problem that we will probably end the night on. So let's look at this problem and let's see what we're going to do. And remember the formula that I told you that I wanted to use, right? With the cap rate. I want to use Uncle Irv. Okay. So remember Uncle Irv in this one. So an income property was appraised for $100,000 based on a 6% capitalization rate. If an investor used an 8% rate, the value of that property would be. So where would we start, guys? Where would we start on this one? Okay, so it's the appraiser appraised the property at $100,000. So yeah, okay, Yvette, 100%. Let's get the cap rate of let's do this. Let's multiply the $100,000, okay, by the 6%, the 0.06, okay? So here's what happens is, yes, we do want to, Sherry, save your information, because here's what we have. You just put out a very, very, very important piece of information. You said the income divided by the rate will give us the value. That is correct. The income divided by the rate will give us the value. But my question to you is this: do we know the income yet, Sherry? I don't think we know the income just yet. So what we need to do is we need to find the income. How do we find income? So how do we solve for income? How we solve for income is this: rate times value. Yep. So the 100,000 multiplied by 0.06 would give us 6,000. And then Sherry, tell me what the last step is going to be in regards to this. So we have an income, okay? And then we want to divide it by something. What are we dividing it by? So we're going to divide the income by something, and we're going to divide it by the new cap rate, the 0.08. Look at you guys doing this all smart. 0.08%. And what will that give us? If we divide it by 0.08, it's all because of you. I don't know about that. I don't know if it's all because of me. Second grade math teacher needs some credit. So 75,000. And here's what I want to do. I want to wrap up there because I think we went over. We did some area problems. We did some seller net problems, right? And what I want to tell you is this, because I usually on the math, I go about like an hour and a half, because I don't know if you could tell, but the reason why I usually cap it at about that is because my voice usually goes. So I'm going to stop the recording right here, guys. Okay. But you guys who are live with me, and I'm going to stay to chat with you for a little bit longer. So let me just stop my recording. You want to stop?